If you had one piece of advice to about building relationships as it relates to your field,
Mhm.
what would you say that it would be?
Always take the time to don't just call someone when you need something from them. Take the time to nurture the relationship a little bit. Know where the kids go to college, or don't just call every 3 years and expect them to pick up the phone and give you what you need just because they know you're using them. That's has to be at least some semblance of a two-way relation. It's a relationship, right? I mean, so if you don't put any time into it or show any interest when you really need that person to come through for you, a lot of times they won't.
All right, perfect. Dave Altimari, welcome.
Thanks, man. How are you?
I'm good. So the name of this, I started this podcast. I don't know, how long has it been, Julie? It's been a while. We have about 25 episodes.
Really?
Yeah, and
Wow.
we're getting a lot of talk about it. I wanted to call it. People always get mad at me because I always say the same spiel every time. But I wanted to call it "I Got a Guy."
Uh-huh.
Like I got a guy.
Yeah,
but
that's a good name.
that was taken, right? So it's "I'll call my guy."
Oh, really? It was taken?
Because it was a trademark on it. So I trademarked "I'll call my guy," and it's conceptually the same thing. Like I want to talk, and guy, of course, is gender neutral. I have women and men on here, but like your guy, your person, your people that.
I actually say that a lot.
Yeah, you say that. I got a guy. Yeah.
I got a guy you can call.
I got a guy, right? So anyhow, so it's sort of, I want to talk to people that are interesting that I know. And one of the themes I try to weave throughout it as we talk is the importance of relationships, because when you have a guy, right, that's a relationship that you've built, and you as a journalist, a long-time journalist, relationships, in my view, are everything, right? That's how you get scoops. That's how you get information. That's how you do the work that you do. So I want to talk about the importance of that and how you did that, and also just talk a little bit about you and tell the people that are listening about you and your career. I've known you for a little bit, and I like what you do, and I love what journalists do, and the importance of the journalist in our country. And so, thank you for coming on. So you're a Baltimore guy, is that right?
No.
No?
Rhode Island guy.
I thought you were. Why did I think you were Baltimore?
Because I like the Orioles, but
oh, that's
not a
right.
Baltimore.
Okay. All right.
Westerly, Rhode Island.
So you grew up in Rhode Island.
Yep.
And is that like you were born there?
Yep.
Okay. And is that through high school?
Yep.
Okay. And so you know all the Rhode Island like lingo, like you know what a bubbler is?
Yep.
And a cabinet.
Oh yeah, coffee cabinet.
A coffee cabinet.
Best thing to drink.
The only thing is it
Clam fritter.
The clam fritter, the stuffies.
Quahog.
The quahog.
Stuffies. Yep.
But is it true that a cabinet can only be coffee?
That's the only one I've ever had.
That's right. It's coffee cabinet,
Yep.
right? And that's a milkshake, right?
Yep.
A bubbler.
Yes.
And how about what's the other thing? The New York system up the arm, like when they take the hot dogs and they stack them all on.
Oh yes, they have.
You know that
they have
the
their
only
own Rhode
system.
Island, they have their own like toppings for a hot dog.
Right,
Yeah.
and you and I have had chili dogs before,
Yes.
but
Yes.
the New York system has
Yes.
that, right? And the
Yeah.
guy stacks it up and he brings it
Yeah.
out. I think
Yes.
someone told me the health department cut him off from doing that.
Probably. Dow's Lemonade is the other big thing.
Oh, Dow's Lemonade. That's
Yes.
right. So you grew up in Rhode Island. What was your beach as a kid? Where would you go?
I grew up in Westerly, Rhode Island.
Oh, so Westerly. So did you go to like Blue Shutters Beach? Is that the
Musquamaket, or they call it the Taylor Swift Beach now. But
right? You want
Watch
to look? You look Watch Hill, right?
Yes.
Okay, so those were your beaches as a kid.
Oh yeah.
Growing up in parents together.
Yep.
Okay, siblings.
One brother who still lives in Westerly.
He's still Westerly.
Yep.
Okay. So, and what did your parents do?
My dad worked at Electric Boat, the sub base,
Yeah.
for 35 years.
Wow.
Yep.
And what did your mom do?
Stayed at home.
Stayed at home. Took care of you guys.
Yep.
Raised the family.
Old-fashioned Italian.
Old
family.
fashioned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So how old are you now?
62.
So you're 62. So is it still
62?
considered, you're not a boomer, right?
62.
Yeah.
I have to think about that.
You have to think about that? All right, you're 62. So traditional family from Rhode Island.
Yep. 100% Italian.
Italian.
Yep.
Okay. And
Wesley's a lot different now than when I grew
do
up
people say, is it Altimari or Altimari?
Altimari.
Altimari. All right.
High seas means high seas.
High seas. I was going to ask high seas. And they were fishermen or?
They were not. It's my family's from southern Italy, down towards the heel of the boot.
Right.
But as far as I know, they were not fishermen. One of my grandfathers was a tailor, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know how, but that's what it means. High seas.
Was the Italian thing important in your life growing up?
My mother came over on the boat, so
Wow.
to speak. My dad was 100% Italian, so
These are first generation
and I was, went to church every Sunday.
Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
So did you have any interest or any exposure to journalism as a kid?
Other than reading, I wanted to be a sports writer.
Okay.
When I was going to college. Matter of fact, I was the editor of. I was the editor of our college, the sports editor of our college paper.
But what was there a point though earlier, like as a child, where you sort of got the fever, if you will?
Nah, I was always into sports.
Sports?
Played it, never really in writing, but.
Did your parents read the newspaper or watch the news?
Both. More watch the news, but we always got the Sunday Providence Journal.
So your parents got the newspaper. Did you?
Wesley Sun.
Westerly Sun?
That was a local daily, yeah.
And then
afternoon paper.
Afternoon paper. And
Yep.
Did you start reading it as a child? Did you observe your parents reading it? What is the?
Yeah, no, I started to read mostly the sports section, quite
Okay.
honestly.
And who did you follow as a Rhode Islander?
Sports
teams, yeah.
I'm a weird. Half of my friends were Yankee fans, half my friends were Red Sox fans,
Okay.
so I started rooting for the Orioles.
That's why I thought you were a Baltimore guy.
Yeah, this is going back when, Frank Robinson, Brooks Robinson.
And this was as a 10, 12-year-old?
Yep. And I'm a big Celtics. The only New England team I root for is the Celtics.
Just the Celtics.
Yep.
But Orioles for baseball.
Yep.
How about football?
The Denver Broncos.
Okay.
I guess orange. I like the color.
You like
orange.
the color orange.
Yeah,
And do you follow
Orange Crush. They were called the Orange Crush back when.
Is that what they call you?
No, that's what the Broncos.
Oh, the Broncos are called.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what did the do you follow European football, like soccer?
A little bit,
Okay.
not a ton.
And then how about?
Watched the game yesterday. But
Oh yeah, we did too. My son and I watched both.
Yeah.
How about and then hockey?
Bruins.
Bruins.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So and you still like sports?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Still a sports guy.
Yep.
All
Oh,
right.
Yep.
So you finish high school. Do you go to college right away?
Yep.
Where do you go?
University of Dayton.
Okay, in Ohio. And
Yep.
that's home of Mike Schmidt, if I remember right.
Yep.
Right?
Amongst others. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So you go to University of Dayton, and is it a journalism focus or?
It was called communications
Right, okay.
back then. So,
And you said before you were the editor of what were you the editor of?
my senior year, I worked on the school newspaper for my whole 4 years there. And then my senior year, I was the sports editor.
At high school?
No, college.
Oh, college. Okay, so you
Yep.
did this. So you
Yep.
do it. And was it for just the Dayton sports? Or
Yep.
Okay.
That was a year that they went to the Final Eight, lost to Patrick Ewing. I got to go to Salt Lake. I got to go to Los
Wow.
Angeles.
As a 22-year-old kid.
As a 22-year-old kid, yep.
And you're Division I.
Oh yeah. Dayton's a good basketball program.
Still to this
Still.
day.
Oh yeah, we're good this year. Yep, top 20 team this year.
Wow.
Dayton's always great fans. That's why they play the first round games, the play-in games at Dayton, because they know they'll sell them out. That's one of the reasons.
Oh,
anyway,
I see.
but, yep. Oh yeah, great basketball tradition.
So you take the so you go there, you start the journalism. Now when college finishes,
Yep.
do you say I want to be a journalist? Did you
I wanted to be a sports reporter.
sports reporter?
Yep. And so I came back to Connecticut.
What was the Connecticut connection? Not
Came
Rhode
back
Island.
to Rhode Island.
Oh, Rhode Island. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
sorry.
All right. So you go back to Rhode Island.
Yep. Trying to, and I just couldn't find a job as a sports writer. And I was working third shift at the local Almax. And a relative of mine, her brother was the sports editor of like these weekly newspaper chain in Connecticut called the Shoreline Times. And so he needed a stringer to write, cover Staunton basketball, Staunton High School basketball.
Where's Staunton?
The Westerly's rival, right over the
Oh, Stonington.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce it?
Staunton.
Staunton. Is that how you're supposed to pronounce it?
That's how they would pronounce it in Westerly.
What is that?
Yeah.
Staunton.
Staunton.
Oh my gosh! Have you ever heard this before, Julie? Staunton.
Yeah.
Okay, is that like a Rhode Island thing?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say
Yeah,
Stoughton. I'm like, what
yeah,
is
yeah.
this? Wow. So Stoughton. I was like, I know Stonington. I've been to every town in Connecticut. All right,
yeah.
all right. So
Same
Stoughton.
town.
All right,
Yeah,
Stoughton. All right.
yeah.
And so you're covering that.
$15 a game.
Wow.
Got $15 for a story.
And how old are you at that time? 24.
22.
22.
Yeah, just out of college.
No computers.
Nope.
And how were you writing your story on a typewriter?
On a typewriter. Yep, and then submitting it to them. Yeah, driving it to their offices.
And you're living with the folks?
Living at home.
Okay.
And couldn't get a job, full-time job as a sports writer. And then, so the editor called me one day. He said, you know, they have an opening for a news reporter at the Old Saybrook Pictorial, which was one of their better papers. He said, I don't know if you're interested, but so I said, what the hell? I'm don't work third shift the rest of my life. So I applied and got the job.
As just a news beat reporter?
Yep, at the Weekly. So I spent 2 years there, and I learned more there in the first 6 months than I ever learned in college. It was
wow, I can imagine, right? So you
had to write the headlines, you had to write the cut lines, you had to write the stories, and you had to write like 8 stories a week because you had to fill the paper. You had to fill the weekly paper, which at the time was pretty big.
And who did it just cover the shoreline?
Old Saybrook. I covered Old Saybrook.
Just Old Saybrook?
Yep.
And you had to find 8 stories of things that happened in Old Saybrook.
Yep.
It seems like a lot.
It was a lot.
Because, I mean, I couldn't think of 8 things in Old Saybrook to write about.
Old Saybrook was a pretty good news town, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was. I loved Old Saybrook. Great town.
And so were you commuting from Rhode Island?
At that time, I was, yes.
So that's over an hour?
Yeah, because I still played softball. I wanted to play softball, so I kept commuting for a couple of years, actually.
Wow.
Yep.
So now did you still get to cover sports?
Nope.
So you're done. Sports is done then. The dream ends there.
That was it. Needed a job. I made $185 a week at the Old Saybrook Pictorial. So a big pay raise from $15.
$50, sorry. So now you're a real reporter.
So now I'm full-time reporter, news reporter. So different than what I wanted to be, but it was, and I just went from there.
And you're 24, 5?
22.
Still 22.
So I was at the Pictorial for 2 years.
22 to 24.
Yep.
Okay. And what happens at the end of the 2 years?
I was sitting at a planning and zoning meeting one night, and the bureau chief of the New Haven Register, who happened to be there, came up and said, you want a job? I have an opening.
That was a big paper then.
So I went to work at the Register in their Old Saybrook bureau. So I just basically literally moved across the street. But
oh, I see. And
I was at the Register, not the.
Because I grew up in the New Haven
Register
area.
was back then was a great paper.
It was incredible. I grew up. That was my paper. We got every day. I grew up in the New Haven area.
I was there just at the end when they were two. They were the morning and the afternoon, and then they combined them into just the Register.
And then didn't they also have? There was a paper that was affiliated with them that had like a green sort of headline. Maybe it was the Heart. I remember the Register did 2, and then there was another paper. It was like
There was the Register and the Journal Courier.
Oh, the Journal Courier.
The Journal Courier was there were 2 different papers. The Journal Courier, I think, was the morning paper, and the Register was the afternoon.
And so, how long were you at the Register?
I was at the Register for 13 years.
Did you know a guy named Mark Zaretsky?
Still works there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. One of the best harmonica players I've ever heard.
He's really good at harmonica?
Fantastic.
Wow.
Highly recommend going to Cafe 9 to hear him sometime.
Is that where he goes? He's still there? I know he's still there because I'll tell you a funny story about him.
I think he's still there. I mean,
I think you're right. Here's why. When I was involved with all that thing with the governor or something, or with FOTUS, I don't remember what it was, but I saw he called me or something. And when I was 13 years old, I was raised in a kind of almost reformed Jewish family. I had a bar mitzvah, but and then that was really it. But a week before, 2 weeks before my bar mitzvah, my synagogue was burned down by an arsonist. And I was in there like an hour before it happened. And he did a whole story on me about like how like this thing was like of the local section. I still have it. I'll have to show you.
Yeah.
And it was like a picture of me, and it talked about how we had to scramble to find a place for the bar mitzvah, and an arsonist burned my thing down. And he wrote it. So when he called me on FOTUS, I said, Mark, do you remember me? And he says, what? I said, I want you to go. I found the paper, and I said, my mom had saved it. And I said, I want you to go look up this article he wrote on this day and call me back. And he calls me back. He's like, holy shit. Wow. I wrote you, like, what a full circle. I was 13 years old. Now you're calling me about this other thing.
Damn.
And he was still there. He was still at
I think he's still there.
But he was there, and you were probably there when, it's where Jordan's Furniture was, right?
Oh, I can't even drive by there anymore.
Remember, but I used to go as a kid, right? They would the tour, the big
that was
plans.
my office. Yeah. Honestly, I literally cry every time I drive on. I can't go on 95.
But that was like an old school news desk, right? I remember
The first day I walked in there, it was a huge newsroom, bigger than the Currents. When it was a massive newsroom because everybody was in one big room. They weren't, separated off, and it was full. I mean, every desk was full.
I remember they gave us a tour, and it was like an open area.
Crazy.
This is my memory as a kid, right?
And it had big window. It was
Big windows.
It was a great newsroom.
No, but everyone. I remember the buzz. I remember walking in. It was maybe a 10-year-old kid, and seeing all these people talking to each other and like passing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Wow, what a dynamic place to be."
Yeah. No, it was so. I worked in the bureau when I started there. I eventually ended up in the main office.
In the main office,
yeah,
right. And that was, and I know we have, like some of the other people that we know that are, journalists too, and they talk about this like the obviously it's a passion, it's a wonderful career, and it's a passionate thing that you do, and they talk about the heyday of being able to be in a newsroom and run things by each other. Why that's gone?
Yep. That's why I left the Current, because one of the reasons I left the Current, we would no longer have a newsroom.
Is that ever coming back, Dave?
Nah, not the way it's set up now. All these hedge fund companies are just trying to squeeze.
But how do you? But I mean, the benefit of sitting in a room like that is like we do that downstairs. We sort of model our thing. We run everything by each other. We spitball. We run it by each other, we bounce things off each other, and it really helps us at our firm.
Oh yeah.
How do you do that now? You just text somebody?
Where I am now, I'm fine. We do have an office.
You do.
So I go in every day, but that was the end for me at the Current when they got rid of. I had to go. We were packing up our desks. I'm like, you don't see anybody. You work, but it's not fun. I mean, it's not a fun environment. So, journalism is a unique field in that you're right. You do, bounce ideas off people, or someone says, "Hey, read my lead," or "What do you think of this?" Or you got a guy. I can call. So you don't get that anymore in a lot of the places. I mean, the Current doesn't have a newsroom. The Register is no longer a newsroom. So it is a thing from the past, unfortunately, which is one of the. It definitely hurts the industry, no question.
Wow. And so you're a Register 13 years, and then you moved to the Current?
I gave my notice at the Register on the day of the lottery shooting.
Oh.
I went into work early.
Is that just coincidence?
It was a Friday.
Right.
I went into work early to talk to my boss, and I walked in the door. I got a call from a state police source. He just said, "You better get up to New Britain." So I went to the lottery. Spent like 12 hours there, and by the time we were done writing the story, it was almost midnight, and then that's when I told my boss I was giving my notice.
Was it because of that, or?
Oh yeah, no.
You were already in talks.
I was going to the Current.
I see.
Yeah.
So you wrote that. So you wrote the top story on that, probably, right?
For the Register.
For the Register, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a couple.
How many people were killed in that one?
4.
Yeah. So you do that, and then you start at the Current.
Yep. 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later, and then how long you were at the Current for?
I was at the Current from '98 until 2000. 21, January 1st, 2021. So 23 years.
Wow. And the Current was your investigative reporter. What was your title?
When I started at the Current, I covered the towns of Colombia and Lebanon.
Oh, okay.
So you want to talk about having to find stories. And it was a new. This is how much the world has changed in journalism. I was hired as part of the Route 2, what the Current called the Route 2 expansion. Hebron, Colchester, Glastonbury,
Marlboro,
Colombia, Lebanon. And I was a Colombia and Lebanon guy. And I had to have a story every day, preferably from both, or at least from one of them. And so when I left the Register, I was covering courts. I had been covering courts for about 3 years, and covering courts in New Haven is a full time. Honestly, I still miss it. It was a great beat. I probably covered 35 murder cases murder trials when I was the court reporter there. It was just a fantastic. I still miss New Haven to this day.
New Haven's a great town.
Yeah. So I went from that to going to like Board of Selectmen meetings in Columbia, and well, luckily I didn't have to do that job for long.
So you do that, and then what do you transition to? Were you
The investigative team.
investigative team?
Yeah, they started an investigative team, and I applied for it, and I got put on.
What do you think is the role of an investigative journalist? How, if you were to describe that simply, what are you trying to do?
Help people who can't help themselves. Make sure that the taxpayers' money is being spent correctly. Make sure no one's stealing funds. My first big project at the Current was still one of my favorites. It was a national story that we did about children dying in restraints in psychiatric hospitals. We had a kid named Andrew McLean who died in a psychiatric hospital in Middletown not too long after I started at the Current, and it turned out I had covered in New Haven the death of a boy from New Haven who died in a similar facility in Massachusetts. So we decided to do a 50-state look at, put a team together and do a 50-state look at how often this was happening. And we ended up with hundreds of cases. And we did a big 4-part series that ended up with Congress changing the laws as to how you can physically restrain children.
So that's interesting. So the journalist can be an agent for change.
Oh yeah, or I mean, obviously the other really big story, other than tons of murders I've worked on, was the Governor Rowland case.
Right.
I mean, we basically, wrote the stories that started that investigation and drove that investigation.
Right.
And he ended up in jail and resigning because he was going to be impeached.
So is it do you see it as more of obviously you don't create stories, you report on them and you dig down and you tell the public about them. Is there ever, how do you keep, like, all the journalists that I'm friends with and I have a relationship with, I always find them to be very, sort of, even if they let their guard down, like politically just sort of, they don't discuss those kinds of things. You always just are very, like, you just take facts and then you report on them, and it goes where it goes.
Yep.
How do you maintain that?
In my position, you have to be someone that is above reproach. That you can, you have to be ethically sound. You have to investigate who needs to be investigated. I've investigated the governor. I investigated Diamantis, a Democrat. I've investigated cops. I've put 3 cops in prison. Should have been a 4th. It's you go where the story goes. You can't have any preconceived notions or think that you're not going to cover something because it's who it is. And this day and age, that's very important.
It's very important. But how do you get, there's a lot of criticism by certain elements of, even of our culture that, claim that the mainstream media, the MSM, or these kinds of things are, they have an agenda.
Yep.
Or, I mean, and to me, I've never, you're the guy, the most prominent journalist I know. And I say to people, I've never seen that with any journalist that I know.
It's worse now than it's ever. I mean, now it's completely off the rails. So it is, but my reputation is all I have, right?
That's all you have.
If people don't think I'm going to be fair to them, then
You're nothing.
I'm done. So
but you see that as a whole.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I've done it as much as I have. I mean, I've had to confront people all the time, but I think people, if you're fair to them and you're upfront with them on what you're, and say, hey, look, I'm writing about this, or here's the records or whatever, I need you to comment. If you don't want to comment, that's fine, but I want you to know this is going to get published. I think most people, if you're straight with them, at least maybe they won't talk to you, but at least they walk away saying that this guy was fair to me. And that's the most important thing in my position. I don't want anybody to ever say, uh, um, I wasn't allowed an opportunity to defend myself, or the guy's not fair. And I don't
But
think.
did you observe any that narrative at all, like in your field, like agenda people that have like a
Oh,
political
I think
agenda?
more and more. It certainly is. I mean, and now we have it's a free for all. I mean,
In terms of journalism?
yeah, everybody thinks they're a journalist.
Oh, I see.
Everybody's an investigative
I see.
reporter.
No, but I'm saying, but before you get to that, like, because obviously that's evolved, right? Because with podcasts, with blogs, with all of these things, I'm saying, like the people that you worked with at the Current. Let's just take the Current. You're 21 years at the Current, or whatever it was. Did you ever see anybody have an agenda, like where they like wanted to advance some political agenda, and did you
Certainly
see?
not anybody that was a reporter or that covered anything like that.
Right.
I don't. I mean, I think certainly most old school journalists are old school. They're you have to play it down the middle. You have to, that's certainly changing. I think for the worst.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, you see now that I think part of it is, and I'm curious what you think about this. There's certain folks on TV that because you see them at an anchor desk, you associate them with as being a reporter. But in fact, they may be, or a journalist, they may be entertainment or a commentator,
Right.
which is much different than a journalist.
Yes, or opinion people.
Opinion
Yes.
people, right? They give
Exactly.
opinion pieces. So
Yep.
I think that's blurred the line a little bit for people because you see somebody on TV and you're like, well, this guy's not he's on TV as an anchor desk, but so is Walter Cronkite. He was at an anchor desk, right? And
Yep.
of course, people would trust him with their lives. I mean,
Yes.
they for their news and knew that he would
No,
call it
it's
straight.
definitely changed. No question.
So that's very, it must be very frustrating to you that you can't.
Being a journalist now is significantly different than when I started. There's a lack of respect for the profession. There have been people who physically have been attacked. I mean,
Wow.
some killed. I mean, if you think about it.
Well, I just saw this weekend again when the assassination attempt this weekend. There were people in the crowd like going after the media, saying, "You did this, you did this," and it's like. I mean, these are people that are just trying to earn a living, taking pictures, interviewing people, trying to bring the news to the public. It's very frustrating to me because I think the role of the media is such an important role because it's supposed to be an independent check on government, on facts. There's supposed to be some objectivity to what somebody is saying.
It's definitely changed. I mean, certainly more so with television, but it's definitely changed, and it's also. Everybody thinks they're an investigative reporter now, or everybody thinks they're a reporter. So it has changed significantly.
How do you get?
And you see it mostly with cop stories. Like even this weekend, this was, people throw stuff out there, and then it turns out not to be true.
On Twitter, right? People
All
just
the time.
put out
even mainstreaming. I think. I started noticing that change during the Cheshire murders, which is back in 2006. How people didn't care. I wouldn't say didn't care, but weren't as upset if there was a mistake, right? Or if they reported something wrong. And that has just evolved over the years. Sandy Hook was another one where there was so much stuff thrown out there that was wrong, including the name of the shooter, frankly.
Because there was a brother at first, right?
Yeah. CNN said it was Ryan Lanza, and, that was who people thought it was.
Well, is that because of the quickness of information?
Part of it is now the internet age that it's changed.
Someone on Twitter has it, says run with it.
Everybody wants to be first, and they don't care if it's wrong because then we just take it off and put it out something else in there. So even this weekend, there was a lot of misinformation at the beginning that people just put out there. But the problem now is it lives. If people have their sides, right? So. A good example is from this weekend. It was first reported that this Crooks kid had given $15 to this Democratic PAC, and that's still, if you go on Twitter right now,
there.
People talking about it.
But it was someone with the same name
even
in
though
Pittsburgh,
the reality
right?
is, it was some guy, some 60-something-year-old guy in Pittsburgh. So, but it doesn't fit some people's. So. So that journalism has changed significantly in that fact alone.
Could you take me through the anatomy? I'm very curious about this. So, say you are the Butler, PA, or which I think is sort of the greater Pittsburgh area,
Yes.
right? So, if you were there as like the reporter on duty that weekend, and you were covering this, how do you start the story? How do you so you see Trump almost gets his head blown off. They get him out of there. Obviously it's a huge failure of the Secret Service, from everything from not clearing the roof to basically, instead of whisking the guy off, they stand the guy up, right? They stand him up for 2 minutes. There could be other shooters. It's a complete failure of their systems. Remember Reagan got shot. They literally grabbed him and they tossed him in and off they went, right? There's 2 minutes. They're taking pictures. It's wild to me. But say you're the beat reporter there and you witness this happen and you're like, shit, this is a huge story. How do you even, like, if I was the guy there, if you said this to me, Rich, this is your first assignment, go. Tell me how you would work that story down.
Well, if you have a local paper, obviously this is an international story, but if you have a local paper, your advantage is that you know the local people.
The chief of police.
I would be trying to reach my sources on the police department, some of whom I'm sure were working, the chief, the prosecutor, who would be in charge of that area, the superintendent of the school system, because
he knew the kid, right? Yeah.
They would have notified him that this kid went to high school. So your advantage as the local person is the local people, right? I'm not going to get some Secret Service source that's going to tell me what happened, or some FBI.
Because you probably don't have it.
No. Even when big things happen, like when Sandy Hook happened here, that was an international event. But I knew some of the guys that went in the building. Frankly, state police guys that went in the building. So I had the local sources. We had the local. So you do have an advantage there, at least at the beginning, and then you just get overwhelmed because the big boys come in and they're going to get all the stuff out of DC, and it's going to take you over. But at the beginning, so this week, if I was working for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which is the biggest paper that would have covered this, I would have been working my law enforcement sources, my court sources, school sources, just to try to find, because some of those people are there, right? They're going to know what happened, or at least have some sense of what happened. Sandy Hook, one of my best, I just started calling. I looked up Board of Education members, old Board of Education members. I looked up the school board for like 5 years, going back. Found some people who weren't on the board anymore, and just started calling them. And I got a hold of a person that lived in Sandy Hook, was on the board, and knew the principal firsthand, and actually knew a lot about what had happened.
Oh, and so even though you may not quote that can give you a lead to where to go.
Gives me a pretty good handle on what happened, that I can then go back to my law enforcement sources.
Say, I'm hearing this.
And this is.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we actually wrote a story the day after the shooting, which basically walked the shooter through the school. It's TikTok of what happened. That still stands actually as a pretty good what happened that day.
How do you develop I guess I kind of know, but I want to talk to you about that. Like, how it takes years, obviously, to develop connections and colleagues and friends. Like, how do you just meet a cop? Like, say a state police source, right? You have a state police source. How do you meet that person? You meet them on a case, and then you befriend them, or not befriend them, but you make a collegial relationship.
It's different now because there's really not anybody that covers police on a daily basis. Everybody just calls from their phone now. But like when I started, going back to Old Saybrook, Troop F was the local troop. So I would go over there a couple times a week just to look at the log, see if they had any cases, try to talk to the commander or the shift sergeant, go out to accident scenes, go out to scenes. So that's how I started to meet people. And three people out of that troop ended up being colonels or lieutenant
Oh,
colonels of the state police
I
at one
see.
point in time. So they remember me as a guy that they met 25 years before, and that's how you. And you also have to. Uh, you have to keep in touch with people. It's got to be a two-way street. If I only call a guy because I need him for a story, and then I don't talk to him for 10 years, and then I call him again, he's going to be like, why should I talk to you? You have to make an effort to
You have to nurture those relationships.
to keep a relationship going.
So, what would
And
be a good way to do that? Like, if you were, like, say, there's a source that helps you all the time.
with police, I think it's just keeping in touch or asking. It doesn't even have to be for a story, right? What's going on in the department?
How are things?
Cops are notorious gossipers.
Oh,
yeah. So, or just even in general, just calling every once in a while,
say how you
so
doing.
let's have a cup of coffee or whatever, or just to try to keep. So it's especially with police that work because an agency like the state police, right? Those people move up the ladder. Right, or they leave, one or the other, or they go to a local department and become a police chief of the local department. All right, so, and those sources always come in handy. And as you know, that's how I got a lot of stories, even in the case you were about.
That's right, because you have the context there, and then how about nurturing other contacts? Is it sending a card? Is it going for coffee? Is it?
Nah, not. I never sent. I usually just call people.
You're
more. I was always, for the most, certainly before I came to the current, I mostly either did cops or courts. So I was kept in touch with the state's attorney in New Haven. Just it was Mike Dearington for years and years. Just to a couple of his inspectors that I got to know really well because I was in court every day. I covered the court every day. I covered their trials. They knew I would be there, so I developed those sources. And even when I left, I was still. And some of those people are now judges, right?
Right.
Or defense attorneys. A lot of times they end up.
How do you know that
defense
somebody
attorneys.
is not like a source? Isn't so one of the things in spycraft I'm fascinated with is when we get somebody from another country that that we recruit, you say, to get us information from Russia or whatever it may be. One of the things that the people that are in the spy trade are always concerned with is the person's a double agent. In other words, they're a plant to give you bad information to throw, you know what I mean? So they do the wrong thing. Like, how do you know that what somebody's up to? Like, what they're, obviously if it's a source for 30 years, you can go to the mat.
Yeah, I think it's trust, right? You have to know who you're talking to. You have to have a trust in the person. There are people that I trust more than others. There are some that, I've certainly been burned a few times in my career where somebody gave me information that was not accurate. You never run a story based on one source anyway. I would never do that. But so it does happen. But I think you learn. It's an instinct thing to some level. You have to learn. There is a trust involved, right, with the person, with the people that your sources are. So, and they learn to trust you, or they know you're going to be fair, right, which is important.
Or not blow their cover.
So, or not expose them. Correct.
Right. And one of the things that, I've dealt with dealing with you is, and I tell people that if you wanted somebody to talk to you is, they don't, and they know this. I think the public knows this to some extent, but it's obviously changed. But I've had to say to people, do you know that like Dave would go to jail before he would have to expose, you saying something. And I think people forget that like a journalist has to protect your sources, even at the risk of being jailed, right? There's journalists that have gone to jail to protect sources.
Hasn't happened in a while, but it has happened.
Right, but in the last 20 years it has. Grand juries have been impaneled.
It's definitely a threat.
Right, because if you ever burn somebody, that would be the end of you, right? You couldn't exist.
Especially if it was someone that was a police officer or a law
right.
enforcement
The word would go out, and that would be the end of you.
In a minute, that would be it. So
and so you're married to a journalist too, right?
Yep.
And how long have you been married?
We've been married for 20. It'll be 40. No, I don't know. 1992.
All right, so whatever that is.
So, not great at math.
But so
32 years.
Has she always been a journalist as well?
Yes, that's how we met.
So what's that like, being married to a journalist, another journalist?
I think it's actually in some ways happens a lot because
it does.
certainly back in the day, like, you know, I mean, there's a homicide at 9:30 at night. I used to have to go out and go cover
And
it,
you
you
have
know, and
young
so
kids, right?
journalists understand that, right? There was this one guy who was a serial killer. The only time I could talk to him was 3 o'clock in the morning. So I used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and talk to him on the phone.
Wait, was he at large when you talked to him?
No, no, no. He
Oh,
was in prison for 2 murders in Maryland, and they were convinced. I'm still convinced that he killed some children up here, and so they brought him up here to search some
burial
to
ground.
do because he claimed that where he had buried, but they never found anything. But I just somebody gave me his number, and I called him, and I called the prison and started talking to him. Yeah, he can only talk at certain hours of the day because and he had a dual personality, and only the female personality could talk. So it was one of my more odder cases.
Wow.
And this was when we had my first, literally around the time my first daughter was born. So it does help. My wife's a political reporter, so she just has a different. We never really covered anything where our beats impacted very much. So, but yeah, we're both journalists, which happens a lot.
It's what's a case that still impacts you to this day? I mean, there's obviously a lot of them, but is it Sandy Hook? Or?
That I think about?
Yeah.
I think about some ones that are unsolved. I mean, Sandy Hook was just that's hard. I actually have the class list that day. Someone gave me copies of the class lists of the first grade classes, and I still keep that on my desk as a reminder that no matter how bad your day's going,
yeah.
But there's a couple of unsolved cases that bug me. One actually, it was just at Hammonasset yesterday. Woman's name was Linda Rayner. She was murdered in Hammonasset.
When
was found? This is a long time, about the early '90s.
Mm-hmm.
Her body was found on Mex Point.
Okay.
And the case has never been solved. And the case was the lead detective for the state police was a guy named Billy Guida, who's probably the best investigator I've ever met. And he was convinced that they knew who did it. And I actually had a different suspect in mind. There was a guy in prison, was a triple murderer, had killed 3 kids in New Haven and got a deal. So he was in prison for life. But what people didn't realize, in the 90s, DOC used to let inmates, even triple murderers, out on weekend furloughs.
What?
And this guy, his name was Harold Mead. He's dead now.
Harold what?
Harold Mead.
Okay.
MEAD. Just happened to be on a weekend furlough at Hammonasset when this woman was murdered. And she was hit in the head with a rock, which was his MO, how he killed the 3 cases that they convicted him of. And so that case has always bugged me. And then the murder of Suzanne Jobin at Yale, that's the other one that I still have a file.
Did you cover that?
Oh, yeah. Got sued.
That's the one with the professor, right?
Yep, got sued by the professor.
And they don't know who did that.
That's unsolved. Never. That one's probably. I mean, you never want to say never, but it's unsolved. Yeah.
And he was never charged.
No.
And that was the one on like St. Ronan Street, right?
Yep. She was stabbed in Edgehill. Excuse me. Beautiful December, 60-degree night in December. Body was found on the corner of a very busy intersection, stabbed 27
Why
times.
did you get sued?
It was odd. Vandervelde, the professor, was named by a couple of TV stations and the Register as a suspect. I was at the Current at the time. We actually hadn't named him, and we were one of the last media organizations that actually published his name after Yale canceled his class. And so I did this big story, and what pissed him off was that I wrote about 3 television reporters that had filed complaints against him. And so he filed a lawsuit against me for that story, against the paper. And eventually it was thrown out.
And,
But that one bugs me too.
you mean figuring out who did it?
Yeah, and that one's unsolved. That's another.
And that's cold.
That's two. Those 2 cases are the 2 that, I think are pretty cold, frankly, and they were never solved.
Wow. And that was sort of at a time, too, when there weren't any cameras, really.
No. I mean, as far as cases, Cheshire is always the one that sticks with me. The Cheshire murders.
Did you cover that?
Yeah. And obviously Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook. The Cheshire murders is still like, it's almost like, it's one of the like most horrific things that ever happened here. Like like the
change. People got rid of their what do you call it? The way to get in the back. Can't think of the name of it now.
The what?
I still have one at my house because that's how the
how to get into the house?
Yeah, to get into the basement. I can't think.
The Bilko doors.
Yeah.
Is that how they got in? Those doors that open up?
That's how Pettit got out. That's how the doctor got out. I think that's how they got in too. I don't remember now.
That was And then of course, did you do all the reporting on how the Cheshire police waited?
We took a lot of heat for that. Yes, we did.
But it was true.
We filed a bunch of FOIs. We had to go to the FOI commission. We fought quite a bit to get that out.
Oh, I know what I was going to ask you about too. Did you see that the report finally came out on Bristol?
I did.
Did you read it?
I did.
Did it include anything about that traffic stop?
It did.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the conclusion on that one?
It was. So it was looked at as to whether the officer obviously acted correctly. Honestly, the traffic stop kind of was shocking, really. That
they let him
go. And I don't know how they let him go from there. Let the guy walk, actually, literally walk. So
walked home.
Yeah, started to walk home, and his mother came and picked him up, I believe. But
was it the same cop who pulled him over? No, that was sort of a different cop.
Yeah, the cop who went to the house actually knew
him right from high school or something.
From playing football with Aaron Hernandez. So.
Oh, that's right. They were buddies.
Yeah, they were on the same team. Yeah. I don't know if they were buddies, but they were on the same team.
So now you're at the Mirror.
Yep.
And is the Mirror solely a Connecticut paper?
Yep. So online.
Oh,
just
online.
Connecticut. Yeah. Yep. Don't cover police anymore.
No anymore. So what do you cover now? Politics or
no investigative
stuff?
I've done a lot of stuff on the Diamantis investigation.
Okay, and that's now federal court. He's indicted.
Yep.
And
case pending.
Norm is representing him.
Back into representing him, yes.
Okay.
Yes, just talked to him the other day, man.
Oh yeah, and so Norm's back. He's representing Diamantis. Yep. Is anybody else in the crosshairs on that?
I don't know. I can't tell, to be honest with you.
Okay.
We've written a bunch of stories about what happened there. There's another grand jury that I know is going on that is a little different, a little separate from the school stuff, but we'll see what happens.
Do you get, when you ever write, like put a story and you get a good story out, do you ever get a call the next day from like, say it was it shed some light on something that may have not have been great for, let's say, a political figure of some kind. Do you ever get a call from like a chief of staff that says, Altimari, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? If you looked at this, like, do you get those calls?
Not really.
Not threatening. I mean, just like breaking your balls.
Once in a while. Back during the Roland stuff, a lot of people call like, "What are you doing? There's no story here, or it's not really a story." So we did get some of that,
But nobody ever gives you a hard time like that?
No, I mean, there are people that are angry, and that's part of it. Sometimes people aren't going to like what you write. I mean, that's just the nature of the game.
That's just what it is. And so, and how long does it, like, so
who comes up with the ideas for the stories? Like, do you have does your editor come up with them, or do you?
No, I've been pretty. I always have something working.
But how do you know that? Like, how do you think is it from sources? Like
What's
you're
a
having
good
lunch
story?
with somebody and somebody says,
or a lot of it is you get tips or you put in an FOI.
look, I know that
documents
you and I were like having a thing one day, and I called you and I said, "Hey, I heard this cool story. Remember, you know what I'm talking about?"
Yes.
And you were like, "That's a really cool thing. Like,
Mhm.
is that like kind of the ways that it happens too?"
Yep. Yeah. Or I get an email.
Do you get random like emails like that?
Oh yeah. I used to get more at the current than I do now.
But now, do some of them you're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like
you never know what you're gonna get. I mean, honestly, at the current after Sandy Hook, I used to get. I got these truthers who were emailing me all the time, or calling me all the time. So but you never know. Somebody takes the time to send you an email, right? That they think it's something important. You never know. I get a lot about probate, which is like the black hole of Connecticut.
Oh,
I get tons of.
do you mean
emails.
like will contests or like? Or
Oh yeah, like or conservator issues, or I get them all the time, and I'm like, it's a black hole. I just don't want to go down. There is probably a great investigation in the probate.
Oh, really? You think so?
Oh yeah.
On what, conservatorship?
All kinds of things, like judges, how they pick conservators.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, who ends up with property and things, and
To me,
people. There was the only time I ever did one on probate was involved the undertaker actually, who was like picking up. He was the guy that picked up bodies for the medical examiner, and I guess he figured out cases where somebody died and they didn't really have any family, and he would file probate cases, or and so ended up getting his license suspended, his undertaker's license suspended.
because he was trying to get the money.
Yeah. So, but you never know when you get it. I always take them seriously. At least respond or call if they leave me a number. And
Have you ever gotten any big ones that you followed up on and led to a great story, like a random tip like that?
Well, when you're covering something all the time, like like the Roland thing, we got tips all the time, right? And some of them were good tips. Certain things to look into, or certain people to look into who had a connection that I wouldn't have thought of or didn't know. Now you know that FOI certain things. So.
It's funny. When I did, I don't know if you remember this. I don't think I knew you then, but I had this big thing with Malloy. Remember with the D-Snap? Remember with the whatever? And I actually wound up getting everyone but 4 people their job back, which was great. And to this day, people still like send me cards and stuff because they get their jobs. But I remember I got a call one time. I was like an email, and the woman was basically like, "I have information for you. I need you to meet me, but you got to assure me that you're going to be anonymous." I'm like, all right. So she's like, "I want you to meet me at the Buckland Hills Mall. I'll meet you outside of JCPenney's. I'm in a minivan." I'm like, to my wife, I said, "You're fucking crazy." I'm like, no, it seemed legit. And the reason why I knew it was legit, because she tried to disguise her email, but it had her name still, but it was like, carpet at Yahoo, but it had her name. Like she clearly sort of somebody who wasn't very good with computers. So I Googled the name and I saw that she actually had worked for the state. So I'm like, all right. So I go there, I park my car, I pull up JCPenney's, like a middle-aged woman in a minivan pulls up. She goes, "Get in." So I'm like, all right, I get in. We pull on she hands me all these papers. She tells me all this stuff, and she's like, "You didn't get this from me." And she drove me back and then took off. I was like, oh, this is great. It really helped me because, to this day, like I still talk to one of the AGs, one of the head AGs, Perry. You know Perry?
No.
Perry's in Winthorne, remember him? He was like the second behind Jepson or whatever. And he says to me, he's like, "You really you'd make us crazy because you would go out there and have these press conferences and get all this information. And we didn't know how you got this information." And so it was like a little journalism for me a little bit. And obviously I'm an advocate, so it's different, but it's the same kind of thing. Like, have you ever found yourself having to meet with a source like that where you were like Deep Throat with the Woodward and Bernstein?
Sometimes it does happen. It's not quite as dramatic as All the President's Men makes it seem to be, but during the Roland investigation, there were people who
Did you have to meet him in a park or something?
There were a couple so there were 2 of us, my John Linder and I, that worked together, and we always went together for everything every interview or anybody that we were going to meet, so that we would have ourselves covered. during that time because I was, obviously a major political story. So
Right, you want to get it right.
yeah, and you want to make sure you're not getting used.
Are you you strike me as somebody that carries a notepad and a pen, right?
Yep.
All the time? Is there always one in your car?
Yep.
And no, you don't use the computer. It's your handwritten notes.
I do tape interviews now. I mean, it's easier, frankly. But I always have a notebook with me.
But we always tell the person I'm going to record this,
Yeah,
right?
well, you have to.
Because then they can't say if
It's
you
illegal.
misquoted me. It's
No, well, yes, but in Connecticut, you have to. You can't tape someone without telling them. Because if he says, "I don't want you to tape me," then you can't.
no, you can't, right? But you can. But as long as they don't say that, you can.
Right.
Yeah, you
No.
can do it. But I'm saying, but you would just put it out there and say,
Oh yeah, and it's easier now. There are services where they record and transcribe.
like AI that does it. Yeah.
Like in seconds, so it's much better than scribbling my chicken scratch. I have terrible handwriting.
I do too. But so but that's
But I still take notes even if I'm doing an interview because I want to. There's something that I obviously think is important. I'll refer to my notes and I can find it.
And how is when you go to your editor when you put this story together? Have you had like knockdown, drag out fights with editors before? Like about they're like, Dave, this is no good. You need more, and you're like, no, I need to.
It
Go.
happens. I mean, not as much recently as in the past. I mean, I hate to keep going back to Roland, but that was one where there was a lot of competition. There was a lot of pressure, but you also have to be right, And so we had some battles to get stories published.
Is there room for if one of your kids said, and I think you have college kids, right? Said, "Hey, Dad, I want to be a journalist." Would you dissuade them from doing that?
100%.
Why? Just because it's
to die. I mean, there's hardly any jobs left. I mean, it's I don't want to say a dying industry. It's kind of macabre, but it's not. I mean, there's layoffs. Every time you turn around, there's layoffs. Everybody's laying people off. So and it's not the greatest paying profession by far.
Right.
I mean, I think there are certainly other things you can do where you would make more money and have more job security than be a journalist.
Right, but what do you think the future of journalism? I mean, we could wind up with that. Let's wind down with that. Like, what does it look like, Dave? I mean, are we
I think it looks like what you saw this weekend. Like
just
it's
free for all.
Like a free for all with people on Twitter posting videos and I think there's going to be the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and those papers are going to make it and do great because they're just national. But what's really happened is the metro papers are dying. The Hartford Courants, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Miami Heralds, those papers are just struggling. They're losing people, and they're not. I don't think they'll disappear, but they're certainly not what they used to be.
So who keeps an eye on the,
In a lot of places right now, nobody. I mean, less and less. I mean, Connecticut is really now. I mean, one company owns pretty much. I mean, you're talking about reading newspapers as a kid. One of the things that was interesting about Connecticut, they always had every little city or town had their own newspaper. Right? There was New Britain, there was Bristol, there was Norwich, there's New London. Now, all those papers, other than New London, are owned by one company. Danbury, New Haven, Norwich, Norwalk, they're all owned by Bristol, they're all owned by one company. So, Manchester, which was always kind of a, feisty little independent newspaper. So it's changed completely.
Wow. So it's. I mean, are they even teaching journalism in college anymore?
Oh yeah, it's a popular. We have a lot of young kids at our, kids, they're not kids, young people at our place. A lot of them came from Columbia. They have journalism
smart
degrees.
people.
Yeah, they have journalism degrees, and I don't know. I worry for their futures. Let's put it that way in this field, in this thing. So it's not like it used to be. We're just talking about the Register doesn't have an office anymore.
Everyone works from home.
They have like a warehouse somewhere, but it's not an office like they had, when you walk in and there's 70 people in the newsroom. The Current doesn't have an office anymore.
Wow.
Those people all work from home.
Does it suffer? Journalism has to suffer without that.
Oh, incredibly. No, and you were talking about covering the police. So no one covers the police. No, there's no court reporters anymore. I mean, do you ever see a reporter in court?
Never.
I mean,
Yeah, once in a while, a big case.
there's
Somebody
a Bridge.
sits there.
There's one guy in Bridgeport, Danny Tepfer, who's been there forever, who's still there doing it. But other than that, the Current doesn't have a daily court reporter. No one does. So it's another whole area that no one really covers.
And who are your journalists, people that you looked up to in journalism, or still do maybe? Reporters.
Honestly, it was mostly sports guys.
Oh, sports guys, yeah.
When I
Like, who was your favorite sports guy?
a bunch, but I always liked Peter Gammons. I liked Bill Reynolds, the columnist from the Providence Journal. He's
Yeah.
a great columnist.
Did you ever meet him?
No. Gammons was the guy that started the baseball, So Bob Ryan, Lupica, when I was young, was a big. So I never was really like Jimmy Breslin, for example.
Right,
Nothing
right.
like that, because I was always a sports guy. So I never. So it was mostly sports.
Mostly sports, though,
Yes.
but
That I
but no like reporters at like the Post or like Bernstein or Woodward. Any of
no,
those guys?
not really. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of guys I've worked with, and then guys and women I've worked with that I respect.
Right.
But I think are great reporters. But
All right. And if you had one piece of advice to about building relationships as it relates to your field,
Mhm.
what would you say that it would be?
always take the time to don't just call someone when you need something from them. Take the time to nurture the relationship a little bit. Know where their kids go to college, or don't just call every 3 years and expect them to pick up the phone and give you what you need just because they know you're using them. That's has to be at least some semblance of a two-way relation. It's a relationship, right? I mean, so if you don't put any time into it or show any interest when you really need that person to come through for you, a lot of times they won't.
Because they don't feel like
They feel used. They feel like, you don't call me unless you really need something from me. And I've had people say that to me.
you say, well,
Yeah, and fairly, frankly. I mean, so that's what I tell.
nurture the
That's
relationship.
what I tell my, the youngins I work with now. That, you have to develop the source. You have to put some work into it to really develop a source. You can't expect them to just pick up the phone the 1 or 2 times you need them every 4 years and expect that they're going to help you.
Right.
If you don't put any effort into it.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. I love, obviously, following.
So we didn't even talk about our favorite case.
Well, we could. I mean, I'm trying to make it go away. But what do you? I mean, we could talk about it. Will they ever find Jennifer?
You never say never, right?
You never say never,
never
of
say
course.
never,
but I mean, if they haven't by now, it's.
I don't. I would say it's unlikely, unfortunately. I don't think we'll ever know what happened to her. I mean, I have theories. I know you do too, but I don't. I hope I'm wrong, but.
Do you think that if neither of them had brought their phones to Albany Avenue, that he'd still be around today?
It certainly would have been a much different case.
Yeah.
Because
you agree that the first part of that day was executed almost perfectly in terms of his.
No, that was the big mistake, no question. Not realizing that, and it was also, quite honestly, I've always felt a mistake by the state police not to. It took them
long time.
Took them like 5 days to 4 or 5 days after they realized he had been there to go to Hartford and look at the video. And if they had done it right away, they may have found more of that evidence.
That was already at the trash station.
That had already been.
Or people rummaged through it, or Fudge. Yeah. Remember Fudge?
Oh yeah, it's one of my One of my weirdest stories I've ever. I spent a lot of time on Albany Avenue looking for those guys because I mean that guy found the bat. I mean
He found the
may,
pillow,
may have found a knife. Who knows? May have been a murder weapon that guy found.
the knife, and the pillow.
Yeah. I mean, possibility, right? I mean, it's in a bag with a bloody pillow.
Dropped off by Fotis.
Yeah, put in there by Dulos. So, you know, I mean, there's a decent chance that was the murder weapon, and they lost that opportunity.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it, and I love learning about journalism, and hope to be able to give you be a source for you in the future. I've got nothing good going right now, but I do know a lot of people, so I like to keep in touch
Had
with
you
you.
chili dogs lately? I mean,
I did.
Other than
Well, I
Frankie's,
had a
what's-
dog last night. It wasn't a chili dog, but I was at the Hartford Amphitheater in Bridgeport. Have you ever been there?
No, I mean I know where it
It's
is.
a fantastic venue. It's probably the best venue in the state. It's sort of outdoors.
Yeah.
And we had my friend has a suite, and he gave us tickets to see Rain, which is a Beatles tribute band.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic. Like they're like the Beatles. They speak in British accents, the whole thing. And they have food trucks within the arena. And there was a food truck, a guy, my wife was watching it and I wanted to go explore. So I went down and there's a guy at a food truck, and it's a hot dog food truck called Walters or Waltman's. I said, tell me about your thing. He goes, we've been a hot dog vendor for 105 years from Mamaroneck, New York. He says,
Wow.
started by my great grandfather. He says we have a dog. We butterfly it, which is how I like a dog. We use a buttered roll, and we have this famous mustard, which is a sort of a spicy ground mustard with relish in it. He goes, you're gonna love it. I said, all right, I'll take one. It was delicious.
Wow.
And again, I love a butterfly dog. He wouldn't put chili on it. They had chili, but he says you got to do it the original way.
Right,
So I did it the original way. But as you know, I love a chili dog. And my question for you is, and I think I've asked you this, but I think it's important we get you locked in on this. When you eat it, you like a chili dog. How do you take your chili dog? Mustard and onions?
No, mustard.
Mustard, no onions.
No onions.
But here's the question I have for you. Does the mustard go on top of the chili or on
Yes.
top of the dog?
On top of the chili.
I think you're wrong.
On
Here's
top of the
why.
chili.
I think the mustard has to coat the dog. Otherwise, it just gets blended into the chili.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
If he gets in there, you get more penetration.
You do. I don't know. I've always just put it on top.
Who's your best chili dog in the state, do you think?
In the state, I haven't been to Blackie's in a long time, so
We should go.
But I mean, I guess I would say Frankie's.
Frankie's right.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a good dog.
Yeah.
It's a Hummel's dog. It's
Yeah.
deep fried first and then griddled.
You know, I probably would say Frankie's.
And do you like yellow mustard or the spicy brown?
Spicy brown.
Spicy brown.
The only
On
kind.
top of that.
Yeah.
All right, so that's your favorite. I think I'm a Frankie's guy, as you know. I think their chili dog is extraordinary. Although Blackie's is very good too.
No, I had when I was down in DC and had Ben's.
Oh, remember that? I
Yeah,
texted you about that. The Ben's Chili Bowl.
Yeah.
They make a good dog. They're right
Yeah.
at the airport.
Yeah, I had one at the ball. I went to a ball game to see the Orioles and the
Of course.
Nationals, and they had a stand there.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah, I went to college in DC, and back, U Street or whatever, I think it's Cardozo, that area where Ben's Chili Bowl is, wasn't such a hot neighborhood then in the 90s. But we used to order, when I took my son recently, we went down to DC, I went to see a friend. We got to the hotel, it was like midnight, our plane was delayed. And he heard about this Ben's Chili Bowl. And luckily DoorDash was open. They're open late. And we got Ben's Chili Bowl at midnight.
Wow.
And got chili dogs. And my son was like, wolfing them down. And my wife's like, you're feeding our kid at 12 o'clock. And I'm like,
a chili
he's
dog, man.
a chili dog.
Right. Oh, I'm gonna keep you up a while.
Anyhow, Dave, thanks so much. I value you and I appreciate you coming in. Thank you.